A third vaccine on the brink of approval, the latest on Tiger Woods' condition, and Bruce Springsteen cleared in the USA. It is Thursday. Here's what you need to know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Thursday, February 25th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Carlo, I don't think I quite landed that new open as well as you were doing it.
No, I like it. We'll keep working on it, everybody.
A quick happy birthday to my mom, who is an avid listener of this podcast. So happy birthday,
Happy
Mom.
birthday, Mom.
All right, let's get to some news. Johnson & Johnson's single-shot vaccine is safe and effective at preventing severe cases of COVID, according to data released from the FDA. The agency expected to approve that vaccine as soon as Saturday, which would add a third shot to the country's arsenal, and it cannot come soon enough, even with cases and hospitalizations continuing to plummet across the country. California became the first state to reach 50,000 deaths. In New York City, researchers say they've discovered a brand new variant that carries a worrisome mutation, which could weaken the vaccine efficacy. They're calling it the New York mutation. Meanwhile, the CDC has quietly launched an interactive tool called Vaccine Finder. The hope is that it will eventually become a one-stop shop for finding approved vaccine providers and available appointments nationwide.
Vaccinefinder.org. I would recommend you just bookmark that now, because I think this will probably become the, like you said, the one-stop shop, which would be great. So they have soft launched that. It's up now. You can check it out. It just doesn't have that many providers on it yet. I want to just mention, Jill, because I want to eat a little crow, which has become something that I have to do often on this podcast. Carlo eats crow today. Okay, so because I said something that was I provided misinformation yesterday, and I feel I'm kicking myself for that, because I really hate that, because I said yesterday, and you actually caught me, which is good, but I said that I didn't think that the long haulers had I said that the long haulers were people who had severe cases of COVID that had to be hospitalized, and you corrected me on that. And sure enough, I was going back and forth with one of our listeners, also named Jill, and she was talking about how she was a nurse. She is a nurse, and she had a mild case of COVID early on in this. Didn't really think much of it, and then she got these long haul symptoms, and she got these anxiety attacks months later, symptoms of like a real psychosis.
Wow.
The respiratory issues that everyone's talked about, the brain fog, so much so that sadly she lost her job. So I just I want to shout her out, because just to say, like, hang in there, and also just to, as a point to make that I was wrong about that, and it's not that this thing is just the flu when you for young and not elderly people. If that makes sense.
1 in 5 people apparently who get COVID-19 have these long haul symptoms. Which is something that we're going to have to, as a society, figure out how we deal with that.
Yeah.
Are there going to be clinics for, COVID-19 clinics and whatnot?
Right.
It's pretty scary. Another follow-up I wanted to just mention. We were talking yesterday about New York letting fans back into the stands at MSG and Barclays, questioning whether or not it was too soon. Well, I think that remains to be seen, right? We'll see what happens with cases, et cetera. But some insight from one of my friends who I'd mentioned yesterday, who did go to that Knicks game. So he said one of the best things about it was how safe you felt. And he wrote, we were just messaging back and forth, and he said, it was an amazing and uniquely special night. We felt extremely safe. Everyone from the ushers to security guests to concession workers were so friendly and just so happy. Everyone said, welcome back. So happy to be back. Everyone, he said, including us, just felt so very fortunate and appreciative. And he said, although we didn't get the win, it was just one of those nights that you won't forget, especially being able to share it with friends and also his son. And I kind of got the chills, because as excited as you are, I think, as a consumer, right? As somebody, like, I can't wait to go to a restaurant and not be nervous. I can't wait to go to a concert. Can you imagine what it must be like for the people who work in those venues to be welcoming people back. I mean, to
Oh, I'm
be
sure it's
how
amazing. Yeah.
appreciative of just like these events and your job. I got the chills reading his description, so I just wanted to share it.
No, I like it.
President Biden, switching gears, nominated 3 appointees to the Postal Service's board who, if confirmed, would give Democrats the power to push out Louis DeJoy, the current Trump-appointed Postmaster General. DeJoy testified to lawmakers for the first time since the election, apologizing for the mail delays during the holidays. Dems have accused him of trying to sabotage the USPS during the mail-in voting period, saying decisions he made to cut service led to holiday delivery delays that are still ongoing.
Have you mailed anything lately? It's like the carrier pigeons out there. It takes forever. It took a week for me to send something to my friend in Connecticut, which I don't know. I think normally what takes like 2 days. So this guy should be sent packing on that alone, I think.
Funnily enough, Baker Machado, who fills in for us on this podcast, sent me a picture yesterday of my holiday card saying, look what I just got. Yesterday, Carlo, it is the end of February. I admittedly, I sent these out a little bit late, but most people got them by New Year's. And he said, though, he's like, it meant even more getting it in February. But that is 2 months. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's nuts, man. Separately, while we're talking about the post office, we didn't mention this yesterday. They announced the winning design of the new mail truck, which is going to hit the road in 2023. It's kind of interesting. It's being manufactured by a company called Oshkosh, which is it's a defense contractor that's based in Wisconsin. They actually won the bid over this EV startup that's called Workhorse, which is sort of sad because that company was really banking on the contract, and I don't know if they're going to be able. They were putting everything into designing this truck, and I don't know if they're going to be able to make it now. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't know if have you seen the pictures of this thing? It's being called sort of. It's kind of adorable looking. It sort of looks like a Pixar version of like what a mail truck would look like in like a Pixar movie.
Maybe they
so anyway,
should
I
sell
linked
them to Amazon.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, there's got to be. There has to be room for it somewhere.
Amazon has all of these trucks, but I don't know.
Prime trucks, yeah, that are greenish.
Right. Also, this isn't related to this, but I just wanted to make a quick mention because it's just sort of near and dear to my heart. Biden yesterday, he revoked President Trump's ban on green cards, which Trump had sort of like randomly started in the hectic days of last spring. He was sort of making a point that like we don't need to be giving out green cards in a pandemic, and nobody ever really questioned it. So that's back. If you're in the process or thinking about getting in the process of applying for a green card, you can do that again. So that's good news.
Back to just the USPS, we're joking about holiday cards and stuff, but for people who are expecting important mail and medicines and things like that, this is just an unacceptable situation. I just want to point that out. Yeah. And did you see, he was so fiery. Did you watch any of his testimony, DeJoy? He's like, you're stuck with me. Like, I mean, he was out there, I don't know.
I guess because the president can't fire him, but I mean, like you just said, he appointed these board members who will now be able. So this guy's on borrowed time now, I think.
All right, we wanted to mention this really fascinating new polling that came out yesterday. About 5.6% of American adults identify as LGBT, according to Gallup, which is a rise of more than 1 percentage point since the last time that survey was conducted, just a few years ago in 2017. A majority of those people identify as bisexual, with a quarter saying they are gay and about 11 to 12% saying that they are lesbian or transgender.
This is I was digging into this the data on this polling yesterday. It was really fascinating. The generational breakdown, especially. So if you look at sort of like the breakouts of the data here, 2% of baby boomers identify as LGBT. For Gen Z, that jumps to 16%. For us millennials, it's 9%. So the vast majority of Generation Z, which for this is, for these purposes is considered people who were born from 1997 to 2002. The vast majority of them who identify as LGBT say they are bisexual, about 72%. So thus about 12% of Gen Z say they identify as bisexual. I just thought that was really fascinating. These polls you got to take with a grain of salt, right? Because I mean, I can assure you that way more than 2% of baby boomers are gay, or bisexual or lesbian or transgender. They just wouldn't tell a pollster. Whereas,
Because they
people
could be
in the younger,
married,
right, exactly. But that sort of stigma doesn't is completely gone for the younger generation, which is a good thing.
It is incredible. I've spoken to Baker. Baker's getting a lot of airtime in this podcast. I've spoken to Baker about this, and he said, in his wildest dreams, he growing up as somebody who's gay, and he grew up in Colorado. He's like, in my life, I can't believe how quickly just
It's amazing.
this has changed. The public perception. He's like, because we were talking about Pete Buttigieg, who's the first openly gay member of the cabinet, and he's like, if he won the Iowa caucus, he's like, I never would have thought that somebody, a man who was married to a man, and it wasn't even an issue. No one cared. He's like, that's what was just so cool about it. I think remember, it's wonderful.
I mean, 2004, which was not that long ago, George W. Bush won re-election explicitly being against gay marriage. I mean, I don't think that could happen in America now.
Even Obama was against it and then changed his mind.
Because Joe Biden actually came out ahead of him and was like, yeah, why are we still talking about this? Like, of course it should be fine. And Obama had to
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that it was Biden who had convinced him. Okay, meanwhile, President Biden signed an executive order meant to address the ongoing semiconductor shortage that's impacting just about every global industry that makes anything electronic. And that's not that newsworthy, but the issue he is trying to address here is something that we haven't talked a lot about. Semis are the microchips that power pretty much every computer or smart device in the world, and they were already in short supply before the pandemic because of the U.S. trade war with China. And then COVID created this huge supply chain breakdown as global demand for electronics soared.
And this is not just, when we're talking electronics here, you're not just talking about smartphones and TVs, right? It's everything. Everything's electronic. Look at the auto industry. The North American auto industry has been really hard hit. Ford, GM, Toyota, Nissan, all of these guys pretty much have had to basically halt production. I mean, straight up halt production because of a shortage in semiconductor chips. It's really interesting. In supply chain circles, and I didn't know this, so I learned it. I don't want to sound like I'm some sort of like inventory genius or something, but this is known as the bullwhip effect. Basically, small fluctuations in demand at the retail level cause these progressively larger fluctuations in demand at the wholesale and manufacturer and raw material levels. Like, think about it. Like if you snap a whip, right? The little flick of your wrist causes this really progressively big wave. And think about it, right? Everybody in the world basically at the same time was told to stay home. And at the same time, it's like, okay, well, I got to pass some time here, so I'm going to order a new Nintendo, or I'm going to order a new phone, or a new TV, or buy a new car. So it's created this huge supply issue.
That is Carlo. That is really fascinating. And until you said the whip thing, I was having a hard time figuring out what you meant, but that makes a lot of sense. Okay, stop us when you've heard this before. Shares of GameStop up 40% this morning. And that's after surging more than 100% at the end of trading yesterday. Volatility in the stock so intense that trading actually had to be halted twice. Now, to the extent the pop was driven by any news, GameStop had announced its CFO was resigning, reportedly pushed out in the aftermath of last month's short squeeze. But that was sort of out there, so I don't really know what caused the surge. The stock was basically being heavily pumped on Reddit again. So, was it that? I don't know.
Deja vu all over again. This is a good opportunity, Jill, to mention your Clubhouse chat from last night, which I listened to. That you what did we say? Co-hosted, co-moderated.
You
moderated
it. Yeah,
you moderated.
I don't know.
It was
I
really
don't know the lingo.
It was illuminating. It was my first Clubhouse experience, and I really I enjoyed it. I think me and you are gonna try one of these. I think we're gonna call it Need2Know Happy Hour, and maybe even bring our boy Baker Machado back on. So it'll really go off the rails if we do that.
Definitely.
But stand by for details on that because we're working that out still. But if you can get on Clubhouse, check it out because it is pretty. It's interesting what they're doing over there. But anyway, back to GameStop. Your co-host or another guy who was like on the panel with you, your friend Josh Brown from CNBC, he made, I thought, a really good point. with regard to GameStop, which is like a lot of these traders are playing with the house's money right now, right? It's free money courtesy of the government in a lot of cases. Somebody's going to write a great thesis about sort of like the behavioral economics at play here with the stimulus and people getting into the stock market. But a lot of this is completely irrational because the money it's not money that you earned, right? So therefore it's like monopoly money in a lot of cases. Not for everybody. A lot of people really need that money and they're using it to buy milk and eggs and pay their rent. But for some people it's basically, free money. And I'm not ragging on anybody. Like that's just how it is. The government told us to stay home, and then they flew a helicopter full of cash over our houses. And this is sort of the what happened after that, right?
Yeah, and he was talking about it in terms of Bitcoin as well. And so it's the behavior, to your point, like when your behavior when you're playing with the house's money, quite different than if it's like a paycheck that you worked your whole week for. Okay, so switching gears, talking about Tiger Woods, the car crash that sent Tiger Woods to the hospital was purely an accident, according to police. Woods is now recovering from major surgery after he suffered an open fracture to his right leg, which means that the bone broke through the skin. Doctors not associated with his treatment say it's too early to predict what his recovery will look like, and that the big concern right now is making sure that he doesn't get an infection.
The police who arrived on scene, they were talking to the press yesterday, and they were talking about how he had no idea how badly he was injured. Like he was conscious, and they could talk to him, and he was able to say like what day it was and what his name was, but he had no idea how much he was hurt, which I think is typical if you've been in a bad accident. Becky was in a really bad car accident many years ago before I knew her, and she said it was the same thing with her, right? You're in this like sense of shock. She had a broken pelvis, didn't even realize it until she tried to move. Look, I don't want to count Tiger Woods out. I mean, you can't. If anybody cannot be counted out of any of coming back from anything, it's Tiger Woods. But I don't see how he's going to play again at age 45 with these sort of major injuries to his lower extremities. It's really sad.
It is. It is. And there's nothing to say. It's just I'm happy he's alive.
Yeah.
And we're kind of just all pulling for him. Meanwhile, a New Jersey court has dropped the DUI charge against Bruce Springsteen after he pleaded guilty to consuming alcohol in a restricted area. He paid a $500 fine. The boss was arrested back in November in a federal park along the Jersey coast for driving under the influence. The news didn't come out, though, until a couple of weeks ago. The details have remained sketchy, but I know you're going to mention this too, Carlo. I think the biggest point here is that his alcohol level was under the legal limit. So it was like, what in the heck is going on?
We didn't get to talk about this because it broke when I was out, whenever that was, a couple weeks ago.
Moshe and I mentioned it, I think.
Yeah. It's so I'm still confused about this, right? So like what you just said. So the Asbury Park Press, which is Bruce's hometown newspaper, said that he blew a .02. Okay, I would probably blow a .02 right now. I mean, like that's nothing, right? That's like using mouthwash. It's well within the legal limit. So I don't really understand why this park ranger arrested him on a Dewey, and why this guy hasn't been fired. I mean, it appears that this was a BS arrest. Not to mention, by the way, I mean, arresting Bruce Springsteen in New Jersey, you better have him. Sacrilegious. You better have him nailed on something major, right? You better have walked in on him, doing murder one inside the Stone Pony. Like I don't know what else to say.
So apparently, and this is just so not confirmed, I can't even believe I'm repeating it, but there is some reporting that Bruce Springsteen had stopped because he was at this park and a fan, wanted him he pulled over to meet a fan, okay? And the fan had like a bottle of tequila and he did a shot with the fan, and then got back in the car and started driving. And I guess the officer had seen Bruce Springsteen do a shot of tequila and get in the car. And so,
I think he was on a motorcycle, but
I
read that too. Yeah.
I think that maybe that was part of it. But I don't know. Okay, and a divorce court in Beijing has ordered a man to pay his ex-wife a lump sum of 50,000 yuan, that's about $8,000, for the housework she did during their 5-year marriage. Just listen to this, it's pretty incredible. This landmark ruling stems from a new civil code in China. Under the law, a spouse can now seek compensation in divorce for intangible responsibilities that they had in the marriage, like cleaning or childcare. The case has become a flashpoint of debate on Chinese social media. Some say the woman is being undercompensated for 5 years of unpaid labor.
This is a really interesting story. I would be in bad shape here. Let's put it that way. If this became law in America, Becky does so much around our house, and I'm not like a complete layabout. I don't want to sound like I'm just like one of these guys that just like sits on the couch and his wife does everything. Like I mean, I do stuff. I do stuff, Jill. Yeah, let's just hope that this law doesn't become a law here.
It's funny that so I think my husband actually does more around the house than I do. So I'd be on the hook.
You'd be on the hook.
But look, I think it just speaks to perhaps we're all waking up to this idea that what somebody does at home has value, especially when you talk about raising children. Yeah. That's stuff. It's hard. You can't put a price tag on it, right? Like you can't put a price tag on reading a book to your child. It's parenthood, right. But at the same time, you're trying to like put a productive member of society, into society, and so I don't know. It's just a fascinating thing. I don't think anything like that would ever happen here, though.
No. But I just think of my mom always saying, because my mom stayed home to raise us, and she would say like, oh, I had plenty of, I had a job. I had the hardest job in the world, raising you two idiots.
It is, by the way. My husband and I say this all the time, our weekends are harder than our week. But like think about that. Your week, and get ready, Carlo, because it's about to happen. Going to work into the office, that's the easy part. It's going home when you have a challenge. All right, that's what you need to know for Thursday, February 25th. And speaking of, again, happy birthday, Mom.
Happy birthday, Mama Wags.